All right, for more, we are joined by Ryan Bull. He's a senior Middle East and North Africa analyst at RAIN. Ryan, given the scale, the timing, and nature of the latest attack, what do you think was Iran's intent or message behind it? Has Tehran made its point here, or is this just the beginning of a larger escalation?
So Iran certainly had a direct point here. It very clearly, through statements, said that this was a response for Ismail Haniyeh's assassination in Tehran over the summer, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut very recently, and the killing of its own general, IRGC general, alongside Nasrallah last month. So this is a retaliation that they were claiming was linked to those assassinations. But that being said, I don't think it's a coincidence that they decided to carry out this retaliation just as the Israelis announced ground operations in Lebanon. So in another sense, it was a warning to the Israelis that Iran is prepared to intervene in the course of its military campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Ryan, the U.S. says this attack effectively failed. It was bigger, 200 missiles versus 110, I believe, in April. But, was this actually down to restraint, or was it really because Israel had very good defenses with help from the United States?
Well, I think we're still going to be sifting through that in the daylight hours tomorrow. What is clear is that the Iranians were unable to conduct an attack that resulted in significant military casualties for the Israelis. Now, whether or not that was intent, that is, that they didn't decide to saturate a single location with all of their missiles, that would have been much more likely to result in destruction and the killing of IDF personnel, or if it was a result of technical incapacity, I think is still an open question. What is still very clear is that Israel's air defense system is robust. Its defensive alliance with the United States is strong, as well as its defensive alliance with neighboring countries like Jordan remains in place. So if Iran is going to enter this cycle of routinely striking Israel, it has to gauge how it's going to strike Israel and how it's going to decide to go after these military targets in the future, because there's no sign that that defensive alliance is breaking up.
Ryan, in April, apart from the U.S., Hezbollah was also a major deterrent against a more forceful Israeli retaliation. Does Israel have a freer hand now, given that many of the groups, the militant groups' commanders, have been killed? As a ground invasion also taking place as we speak?
To a large extent, Israel's hand is much freer by other developments in addition to the weakening of Hezbollah. The United States has shown little inclination to use its substantial leverage over Israel to restrain its hawkish actions. We now know that the Biden administration wasn't told beforehand that Israel was going to kill Hassan Nasrallah. That was considered a very disruptive and kind of a red line for the Americans out of concern of escalation. So Israel has assessed, and it seems to have assessed correctly, at least for the moment, that they can carry out these really adventurous, hawkish missions against their adversaries region-wide without, one, triggering a region-wide war, and two, without causing a diplomatic crisis with the U.S. And I think that suggests that, unlike in April, when Israel decided to conduct more or less a single airstrike on a site related to Iran's nuclear program, an air defense site, that this time they will go after a more substantial target set. Perhaps not a strategic destruction campaign, but certainly one where there will be more than one target, and it may target anything in Iran, from its nuclear program to its energy facilities to its missile and drone production capabilities.
So if they do, let's say, strike an oil refinery or even a nuclear facility, then what would consequences be if they were to happen?
It would, of course, depend on the damage that happens to Iran. If the attacks are considered insubstantial to Tehran, if they believe they can repair it quickly, Iran may call the Israelis a failure, say that their counterattack was also ineffective, and then climb off of the escalation ladder for the time being. On the other hand, if these attacks are seen as substantial, if they interrupt oil exports for Iran, if they showcase a national humiliation for Iran by, say, destroying sensitive nuclear sites, that's where Iran is likely to climb back on the escalation ladder and consider its next strike against Israel, which may take some time, but then becomes inevitable if Tehran believes that it must respond to this Israeli counterattack.
Ryan, what was striking is that we haven't heard any mention of ceasefire or de-escalation by the U.S. in the wake of the Iran attacks. Why do you think that is? I mean, what does it signify? Should we read, what can we read into this?
Yeah, at the core of this is still all about Gaza. And there is still no sign that the Gaza conflict is going to come to an end. Even as the Israelis are calling that an insurgency, there is still a Hamas leadership that they are still negotiating with in a very slow moving process. And without a resolution to Gaza, all of these secondary and tertiary conflicts continue to have fuel for their fire. So there can't be a ceasefire between Iran and Israel directly. And the Americans recognize that without solving that core issue in Gaza. And for that matter, Israel's center of gravity for its military campaign has now shifted north to Lebanon. And so now there are two ceasefires that the United States would need to negotiate to a satisfaction of both the Israelis and to their adversaries in some capacity to de escalate regionally. And Iran is going to be pulled into those conflicts, and it won't be a driver of the resolution of those conflicts.
And Ryan, I just want to be very clear and very quickly as we ponder all the possibilities, the underlying basis for Israel's behavior and what it's done is the fact, and it is this fact, that Washington will come to the aid of Israel should a full-blown war erupt between Israel and Iran?
That is still the assumption that this Israeli government is making. So far, they have been correct. They probably will be correct, even in the most extreme circumstances. The U.S. has a very strong relationship with Israel on the defensive front. Where Israel may miscalculate, and it seems like they are on that path, is when they strike Iran in such a way where Iran really does threaten that regional escalation that could affect oil prices, cause a geopolitical shock. And doing that in front of an American election is not only politically dangerous in and of itself, but it's also a strategic disaster for the United States, which more than anything just wants regional stability. It wants this conflict to de-escalate and to stabilize on its own. And if Israel is seen as a non-constructive partner in that direction, eventually Washington, whether it's under Biden or Harris or Trump, will conclude that some sort of steps need to be taken to restrain Israeli behavior.
Okay. Ryan, thank you very much. We leave it there. That was Ryan Bull, Senior Middle East and North Africa Analyst at RAIN.